Fantasy Football Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Shady Rays. SGPN is teaming up with Shady Rays for Shady May. Get 50% off Shady Rays using promo code SGPN and then go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/shady for your chance to win $500. We're also brought to you by the Edge Boost. Edge Boost enables you to double your bet with no interest. Go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/edge to get started today. All right, everybody. Welcome back. I am your host, Emerson Beery, and brought to you by my co-host now. Might as well. We tried for a while. I was going to do random guests, and now we're just tag teaming this podcast now. So we'll say my co-host, Justin. How you doing, my friend?
Appreciate the credit. Appreciate the courtesy.
It's about time. You're like a guest. It's just how the podcast is now. I love doing this podcast every single week with you, my friend. How's it going?
You as well, buddy. You as well. It's going well. Right now, I'm in purgatory for Underdog best ball drafts. Underdog, if you're seeing this, please let me in.
I didn't even know that was a thing. So that shows you what kind of degenerate we're dealing with over here. Where Underdog, so I had to put him on a cap.
So yeah, it's been 2 days and no drafts have been done, and it's a little sad. I'm just saying, when you've got the itch, you've got the itch, and I'm trying to get ahead of these market swings here. Alexander Madison's, Dalvin Cooks, the Zeke Elliott's, the Kareem Hunts, trying to get ahead of the market, trying to get the value while it's still there. I don't know, Underdog, if one of these winners are drafted or, come to be drafted from 514 or 515, I may have to take legal action.
Well, I'll go ahead and tell you that you might want to go ahead and keep withdrawing $25 out of your account a few times a day. Otherwise, your wife might start getting like, where's all this extra money coming from? So don't leave that open for interpret. Don't get the idea in her head. Go ahead and keep making those withdrawals.
Buy a new pair of hockey gloves today and some mesh shorts from the merch store. Promo code
Perfect.
shorts.
With that, we're actually not talking about Underdog today. We're going to be diving in because it is what peak season it is right now. It is Dynasty fantasy football season.
Yes, sir.
Rookie drafts in full swing. You might have just completed yours, or maybe you have still a few around the corner. I completed the majority of mine, but I have still about 5 or 6 more coming up this week. And startup season, now that the NFL draft is over, this is my favorite time to take advantage of early season startup values where people are still trying to get their feet wet in the content and trying to figure out everyone's situation this year, some outstanding value. So with that, I just want to dive, into my favorite startup strategies, and I'll lead that into rookie because most of them translate into rookie draft as well. And I just want to hear your thoughts too, Justin, because my first thing I always tell people is to draft the best player available. While some leagues do fold over time, I always think you should approach it pretty much through a 3-year window is what I always think. Dynasty fantasy football never sleeps. There's always an opportunity to take a trade later on, I think. So whereas where a lot of fantasy managers are focused on filling their roster during their startup draft, I always think that, the player pool isn't deep enough to keep making picks based on positional needs. Instead, draft the best player available and focus on accumulating the most assets. When you're going through a startup, what do you think about that? Are you filling positional needs through the draft, or are you focused on taking more of the best player available?
No, I like going BPA. I do, but I think your BPA needs to be based off of your own rankings, like, to go out and get your guys approach. I don't want to just play the board the way that it is. You're going to see different draft stocks available on all the platforms that offer fantasy football, right? Yahoo, Sleeper, Fantrax. Everybody's going to have a different level of ADP, and everyone you're drafting against is going to have, the same going to be looking at the same board. It's not, the classical home draft. Everybody gathers around with their own coolers and they put up a board and you bring your laptops. No, you're all sitting there in this, virtual draft room and you're playing off the same board. So BPA is a great way to go. I like doing this just because I don't want to go in the draft with any predetermined, set, parameters in my draft. I don't want to go in and say, yeah, I'm absolutely going running back. I'm absolutely going, wide receiver heavy and going 0 RB. I don't want to be fully committed. I want to, see the draft, feel the draft, be the draft, be adaptable. And going BPA is going to help you with that, especially again when you're using your own rankings.
The Be Water approach, I like it.
Yes.
Toronto Dave, hello to you, my friend, as well. Thank you for joining us today. Yes, and I just think, what I always tell people is point season is only a short amount of the year. And what I mean by that is we're only scoring points for our fantasy teams 20 weeks out of the year. The other 3 weeks out of the year, it's our fantasy team is what the fantasy market dictates what it is. So what I mean by, I treat my fantasy team kind of like an investment portfolio. I go into every draft, trying to accumulate capital, accumulating the most assets. And that's how you build a successful team over time. You can always make, especially for a running back or, a tight end or something like that, you can always make a trade. You can always find somebody, off waivers, even, somebody who's a surprise player to fill those positions if you have a great base. So that's what I like to do. Start off, always take the best player. I've had rosters where, I've taken 8 quarterbacks in a super flex league to start off my draft, just hoarding the quarterback position because people are undervaluing it. And, that strategy isn't for the faint of heart because I've had moments, I had to wait a whole year to sell off those quarterbacks and to start competing, but it will happen over time. One other, I'll translate that into rookie drafts is you saw this tweet this week. I got Bijan Robinson at the 1-3.
That's not fair.
At the 1-3 in a Superflex rookie draft. Can you believe that? Did you see Bijan Robinson go anywhere except for the 1-1?
No. Every draft I've done so far is 1-1.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I across 30 leagues, I think I saw it twice. One of them was the 1-2. Anthony Richardson went first. But I did get him. I was shocked. 1-3. I couldn't believe it. Bijan Robinson, TMC. We'll talk about Kenny McIntosh in 2 seconds, but I just couldn't believe it. So I guess where I'm going with that is that I just can't believe a manager would make that decision because Bijan Robinson, although even if you need that quarterback, Bijan Robinson has so much more trade value when you draft him that early. You can sell Bijan Robinson for nearly 2 Bryce Youngs. You can get a better quarterback than Bryce Young for Bijan Robinson. You can get Bryce Young and a lot of assets on top of him for Bijan Robinson. So that's where I'm going with that. Yeah, we'll go to a quick comment in the questions really quick, or question in the comments, I should say. Thoughts on McIntosh at 5-1 in a Superflex rookie dash? He's an intriguing prospect, an intriguing late round flyer. This is what I like doing though, is accumulating those guys, the second and third string running back potentials, because injuries could just make him fantasy relevant right away. What do you think about that?
No, I think it's a great value. 5-1 or later is great. I honestly don't hate the second half of the fourth. You're getting a little bit, a little bit of hype, from Pete Carroll out of that backfield, saying that every guy could, potentially at some point have a role. Talking up Zach Charbonnet and Kenny Walker specifically, but really all that you heard there is they're going to use the running back a lot. They're going to use the position a lot. I think there's a lot to like with McIntosh and the positive coach talk. Also wouldn't hate, Dwayne McBride at that spot either. He's going to be someone that I see climbing up here once you see Dalvin Cook leave the Minnesota Vikings here at the end of the month.
Yeah, Dwayne McBride's an interesting guy. He usually, he's somewhere in that 4th round rookie pick range. He was somebody I thought could sneak up rookie draft boards, but that didn't get the draft capital necessary.
And I'm not coming from a strong place of conviction. I just mean he will go up in ADP, get ahead of that shift, get ahead of the market, at this point in time. Because like I said, at the end of the month, if you're still doing these startups or these rookie drafts, his stock's going to be climbing.
Before we dive into my next tip, I just wanted to give one more quick shout out to our friends over at EdgeBoost. SGPN is excited to announce an exclusive early access partnership with EdgeBoost, the world's first bet now, pay later Visa card. Similar to buy now, pay later programs like Affirm and Afterpay, EdgeBoost enables you to double your bet with no interest and pay back the advance over 4 equal weekly installed payments. That's right, 0% interest. Simply deposit funds into your account, and EdgeBoost will match the deposit so you can use 2 times the funds on any legal sports betting site. Edge currently offers up to $2,500 in advances, so you build a repayment history. My EdgeBoost double down play of the day is, and I have some good NBA picks, but I'm not going to, because I want to take a look at the stuff for tomorrow. I was going to talk about the NBA, but I'm going to let the other guys at the NBA podcast tomorrow tell you about those. And just so you know, we do have a special offer as well. The first 500 SGPN users will start at a $1,000 advance limit, and the next $2,500 users will start at $500. Go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/edge to sign up today. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/edge. Must be 21 years or older to use. Only valid in legal gambling states. Problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right. And with that, we are going to dive into my next tip here. And that is, I always hear people say you're either drafting to win now or you're drafting to win later. And I think you can do a little bit of both of that. And and when I say that is you target wide receivers in their second or fifth year in the league in the startup draft. And and that's how I usually, it sometimes translates into that what do they call it? That 1 year kind of transition period where you're waiting a year and then you go and you're competing for a championship. But by establishing a strong base of wide receivers and quarterbacks in Superflex leagues, and particularly quarterbacks in the Superflex league, starting off your draft with 2 elite quarterbacks, I always think is a very strong way. You can always get those running backs in the subsequent years to fill out your roster. So yes, when I do a startup draft, I want to get players who are going to be starters on my team for 2-3 years down the line. So by that third year, you've been accumulating more players over that couple of years in rookie drafts, whatnot, through trades, waiver wire, and you have a great base to pick from here. Quarterbacks, wide receivers, they have more longevity and are a little bit more stable than the running backs. When you're a start, are there positional kind of, how do you feel about that? How do you approach the wide receiver running back position in a startup draft?
Well, kind of, bringing it back to winning now as well as winning later. I do believe that 0 RB is probably the best approach for that. Receivers and QBs are going to be lasting, obviously, the longest, have the longest potential careers in today's modern NFL. And, when you're looking at that strategy, the type of later round running backs that I'm usually getting are either fitting the mold of a second or third year guy. One that I really like this year is like Antonio Gibson. He's going very late and he's being very discounted after his third-year production when Brian Robinson came in. I'm expecting a bit of a shift there. So I really like him in the back there. He's got experience, still has some miles left on his legs. But another one that I like is like a Tyler Algier coming in as a second-year player. Not hyped up as much, playing behind Bijan Robinson, and I'm getting a little bit more exposure, at least to his, potential activity for the next 2 or 3 years. In those moments where, he booms or goes off, any of these type of assets, you can try and sell them and flip them for, additional capital, whatever it may be. So I'm definitely always about, trying to flip running backs, keeping, the youth on the team, maintainable, right? I mean, I don't have a problem drafting older quarterbacks because I know that they're going to stick around. You know what I mean? Like I feel like a lot of these ageists in Dynasty, they get so fixated with the number, how old you are, like they're just going to stay off of you. And so you'll see, later QBs go later. And again, that just kind of breeds into that 0 RB approach. I can get really high end skilled, young receivers early, age quarterbacks, and, maybe just not as prized as highly touted running backs in the later rounds.
Yeah, and it's like I was saying earlier, point season is only 20 weeks out of the year. Trading away those running backs for some more stable assets, like when we know Dalvin Cook, his value could crater before the season if he gets cut, doesn't get in the right situation, or something like that. So running backs are very risky at this point in the draft, man. I'll tell you, man, I'm having a tough day today. That Mother's Day was yesterday. Got my butt kicked a little bit at the restaurant, and now, man, I need to start doing a little red leather, yellow leather. I can't talk today. Next tip here is to do draft. If you followed what the tips we've done so far, and you started off with a strong base of wide receivers and quarterbacks, this fits in perfectly. Draft late round running backs, and I say this because the wide receiver market, although dynasty managers love their wide receivers, but the market is very saturated. Productive players like Jacoby Myers are barely selected as wide receiver 4s. We look at Zay Flowers and Quentin Johnston this year, entering the league, first round NFL picks. Those guys are borderline wide receiver 3s. You know what I mean? Not even top 36 wide receivers likely in a lot of people's rankings. So it's such a saturated, it's so hard to make a difference as a fantasy wide receiver. There's so many good ones, so dynasty managers can find 10 to 12 PPR points from a wide receiver anywhere. So I like to target second and third string running backs. Like I was telling you, injuries, depth chart shakeups, these are can be a massive surprise every single year, and they can be thrust into a lead role. So running back with no value at all can all of a sudden be a top 24 running back with simply just a higher snap share. So uh, I love, after I get my wide receiver set up in a draft, I love just give me, every second string running back in the league. I'm going down the list. I'm going to start taking them. So I always feel like, it's hard for these guys, the Cedric Tillman's even in the rookie draft. So, what difference is this guy going to make? So where do you feel about are you taking a lot of handcuff running backs in the draft? Are you going to continually stack and maybe the more productive, the Jalen Hyatt, the Cedric Tillmans, who could be safer players?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I want to fill out my needs the best I can. And my most recent my most recent rookie draft, I had 2 picks in the top 6, and I needed a quarterback. I said, no, I'm good. I'll ride with what I have. And what I have isn't that great. It's like Lamar Jackson and Desmond Ridder, and I can't even remember my third quarterback. But I went with Gibbs and JSN. And that's what I was actually going to ask you, is like where you would kind of go back and forth there between Gibbs and maybe not JSN, because I know that you would take him for sure ahead of him, but maybe like Gibbs and Quentin Johnson, because that kind of like combats the conversation a little bit. Because I would still take Gibbs. It kind of goes against like what we're like pushing here, but I still think like that specific context, I would go with him. But like when I'm looking at later round running backs in rookie drafts, I was loving guys like Chase Brown, Israel Abanaconda. I'm trying to think of another one that I took. I had this last draft. I had like 8 picks. It was ridiculous. I walked away with a lot of players. No, I guess it was pretty equal. I had those 2, and then Gibbs, and then I also had drafted Cedric Tillman, who you had mentioned. I took him with the last pick of the 3rd round, and Jalen Hyatt and JSN. So kind of more balanced, I guess. But I just think that those type of players like a Chase Brown and Israel Abanaconda, McBride, who we had just mentioned, McIntosh, like those guys, yeah, they won't have that peak outlook for the year, but weeks 13 plus, these wheels start to fall off of these running backs, and they're going to be a really good value for you. So if I'm more balanced, like if I'm coming in a draft and I just have like 4 picks, even if I need a running back, even if I have to go heavy, I will still draft the highest ceiling receiver if possible. Like if I had that 1 pick in that first round between Gibbs and JSN, I would still go JSN, even if I was running back hungry, kind of bringing it back to the point that you had mentioned of just capital, what I can get back in return if that player does boom. And I feel like I would get more back from a booming JSN than I would from a booming Gibbs, because everyone's going to say in the back of their heads, oh, it's a running back. His window is going to close faster than JSN's.
It's interesting. I always take Gibbs over JSN in every rookie draft I've been trading up from the 1-6 actually a lot of the time where JSN is to get Gibbs at the 1-5, because while you're right, I think there's more of an immediate return on Gibbs. I think JSN's a little bit more of a slow burn. I like the long-term upside, but I don't know if he's going to I don't think we're going to see him shoot up the rankings this year. I don't think we're going to see him maybe even shoot up the rankings in 2024. I think this is kind of a little bit of a slow burn, long-term contributor. Maybe not, doesn't have that game-breaking upside, though, in a Seattle offense with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett for a little while, and 2 very good running backs. So I'd like, I've been taking Gibbs because, I think, especially, with the excitement of the 12th overall pick being in the draft. And then if he just gets, all of a sudden, if he just has a great game, especially right off the bat, we're talking about a guy who's probably a top 5 dynasty running back already, just given the landscape the way it is. So many aging running backs, a running back in their first year. So I actually love that, this is another tip I didn't have on the sheet, and I'm interested to hear you say it. Actually, okay, before I dive into that, I just got to pay our last round of bills really quick. Our friends over at Shady Rays deserve their shout out really quick, and because I love their sunglasses. Shady Rays is teaming up with SGPN for Shady May. Not only do you get an amazing 50% off, but you also have a chance to win $500. Shady Rays has you covered from the sun to the slopes with premium polarized shades, customizable snow goggles, and much more. That's not all. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear as well. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by lost and broken replacements. If you don't love them, exchange them for a new pair or return them for free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop with Shady Rays. Their team always has your back. And for our international listeners, Shady Rays has you covered as well with shipping to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. Go to shadyrays.com and use code SGPN for 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses. Then take your receipt to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/shady for your chance to win $500 Shady May contest. And if you are still listening, if you wouldn't mind giving a like, a subscribe, a rating to our YouTube page, a subscribe, it would mean so much. And are we still doing our jersey giveaway, my friend?
Yeah, I was just about to hit on that. As long as you go to our Spotify and Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. Go ahead and send that review to us. Take a little screenshot. DM us at SGPN Fantasy on Twitter, and you will be entered. We're giving away a Lamar Jackson jersey at the end of the month.
That jersey is still going to be relevant because Lamar Jackson is staying with the Ravens. So I guess it would have been cooler, actually, maybe if it wasn't. You get a signed old school retro Baltimore Lamar Jackson jersey. But anyway, so what I was going to say is I love considering how risky running backs are anyway, I love taking the rookie running back. I love taking this home run swing on a rookie running back because, if they hit, man, they're going to shoot up in value being so young, and you're buying at a low point considering, their age and potentially their talent. So, you see running backs in their first year, if they hit it right off the bat, they shoot up in dynasty value. So I love taking the swing, even though they're a little risky. I think running backs are risky in general. So you take the swing on the rookie running back, but you say you prefer JSN. So I understand that.
Well, I took Gibbs and JSN in that one. So I took Gibbs at 1.4 and I took JSN at 6. I opted out of taking quarterback.
So the Stroud. So you opted out of taking Stroud, I'm guessing?
Yes, he was the only one that was going to be left to me. So I was just like, instead of just being only cornered with one of these guys, I'm just going to take 2 players with a lot more upside because I have a fair amount of depth still, throughout the rest of my roster. I was like, I can move somebody for a quarterback if I need it at some point. I'm not going to overpay right now for this. And then I also just never drafted a quarterback the rest of the draft.
I just rarely ended up with across 25 leagues, I barely have any Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. It just didn't work out that way. I didn't have the 1.3 and 1.4, and where I thought I was going to have one of them available, I ended up with Bijan Robinson at the 1.3. So yeah,
that's crazy. Yeah, well, that's just nuts. I do have one share of Bryce and one share of CJ so far. So I'm hoping to grab one bit of exposure to Anthony Richardson if I can. I've got 1.4 left. That's all I've got. So I'm hoping he can fall to me.
I've gotten some good bit of Anthony Richardson, so I'm depending on him in a few leagues. Hopefully he can deliver as long as he's on the field, some consistent at least quarterback 2 production with his legs, which I don't think should be a problem with his rushing upside, but we will see. Next up here, I have, I wanted to hear, how do you approach? I'll start off with you. What are your feelings about how do you approach the tight end position in a dynasty startup draft?
Later, great. It's that's it. I like the top 3 guys if I can get them at a value. If I feel like the rest of the draft isn't valuing them, some startup drafts I see Travis Kelce go really early. Sometimes I see him go late. And really, whenever someone wants to kick that door in and start the tight end party, that's when you got to get ready to dance. So I like the top 5 a lot. Really, the top 3 if I can get one of them. Kelce, Andrews, Hawkinson. I will settle for, a Kyle Pitts or a Dallas Goedert. But if I'm not doing anything like that, if I'm, if I don't get one of those top 5 guys, that kind of like tier break, I'm just like, I'm not even going to look at the position for a while. Probably I'll probably wait till well into the double-digit rounds. Of course, pending, if it's premium, 1.5. Double tight end league, whatever, obviously there are ways for leagues to value them more, and those opportunities I'll, certainly, start dancing a little earlier, we'll say.
Yeah, I just can't. Tight end is the most frustrating position by far in fantasy football. Other than Travis Kelce in recent years, you touched on, the top 3 to 5 guys. Even those guys, though, looking back just a couple years ago, that was Darren Waller, George Kittle, Zach Ertz, Mark Andrews. They've all had mixed results. They've all had very, very high ADPs, some of them even higher than Travis Kelce's at certain points over the last few years. And they've all had mixed results due to injuries or target volume concerns. So, while these players have had wonderful moments, they didn't pay off at those ADPs. Kelce is aging very well. But other than that, I think there is very rare situation where I'm taking a tight end early on.
So
in a
I can
dynasty
tell you an
league.
example where I actually did take Kelsey in a startup recently. Very good format, I think, for it is a 10-team league because there's so much talent left, and it was even a
That's
super
okay.
flex. So
That's
like in a
interesting.
10-team dynasty, like I don't really hate going elite tight end early. You're going to be able to make up the rest of your group. There's just an extra 2 picks available. I mean, it's just the math.
Yeah, and it's just I actually really like that advice in a 10-team league. And Travis Kelsey, I mean, if people are just going to discount him just because the age, I mean, if we're going to take running backs who have 1 to 2 year production windows most of the time anyway, might as well take Travis Kelsey, who's going to be tied with Patrick Mahomes. He could, it's hard. Even when Travis Kelsey regresses, what's that going to be to? Is he going to regress to a 1,000-yard tight end? You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think Travis Kelsey has a lot of juice left. But other than that, I'm waiting because you just look at it. I mean, teams always talk about wanting to involve their tight end. They talk about wanting to put their tight end in the slot. And when it comes down to it, none of these move tight ends are better than the third or fourth wide receiver on these teams. You know what I mean? Wide receiver is very saturated. Like we were saying, there's so many good wide receivers. So even the best receiving tight ends, for the most part, are not as good as a team's third or fourth option of wide receiver. So they're simply not going to play in the slot a lot of the time either. Right. So it's just really hard, inconsistent. There's a lot they have to do that, they have to be blocking to be out on the field. Then they're the third or fourth best receiving option most of the time, even behind the receivers that we don't like. So I just think it's always smart to stack up on later guys and just start the guy who's been getting the most touchdowns lately. You can get a lot of guys late. I like stacking tight ends. You can get Gerald Everett late, Tyler Higbee, and Jawan Johnson. And, you can just start whoever's hot between those three. You can play the matchup a little bit. And, you can find your right times because, isolate, what do you think about this trade? I sent a mid-second and a late second round pick in this year's draft, 2.5 and 2.9, I believe, for George Kittle.
Feels a little expensive, but I mean,
feels expensive.
Do you have any more exposure to round 2 or 3?
And that draft, I can't remember. The leagues all run together.
To me, it really depends on like what you have left in that draft. And what you like, what other tight end that do you have any other tight ends that are up top?
See, I think I needed a tight end. That's why the person sent me that trade, but I thought that was easy.
I traded a second round pick in a 20-team league. So that's, like mid, what is it? 20. So like in the mid 30s for Kittle straight up. And that's cheap. I mean, that's an easy, just like I wouldn't even think about it. That's an easy trade for me. Well, yeah, in a 20-team league, like my tight end was terrible, so it was a huge upgrade already. And that second pick is, like I said, it's probably like somewhere between pick 32 and 35, somewhere in that range. So yeah.
That's too big of a discount. I think George Kittle. I think that's pretty fair. I think George Kittle can still be a difference maker, especially at the tight end position. And what are we thinking? Looking at the 2.5, 2.9 best case scenario, like a Roshan Johnson at the 2.5.
He booms. You know what I mean. And like I said, I just went out and I acquired him, so it's not like I don't hate him or don't dislike him or anything like that. It's just that his upside just doesn't feel as strong right now today in May. Not knowing the quarterback situation. Yeah, they should have a good offense no matter what. Everybody's going to be getting the checkdowns, but you would just really like a competent quarterback there to give him, that elite type of upside.
I'm just really down on this class, I guess. You know what I mean? Like I said, you get me excited about Roshan Johnson at the 2.5, usually 2.9, maybe Sam Laporta or something like that. But it's just, this class was very disappointing. So, I'm selling where I can. And, another trade I really like today, before we get into some more advice, I sent the 1.9 and 1.10 for the 1.5 to move up and take Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, I like that. Well, this is, you and I have talked about this before, being kind of like a 6-and-out draft for Dynasty, especially, oh my God, if you take out the quarterbacks, if it's single QB, then you're down to like 4, 5. Yeah. I mean,
3,
not
really.
a lot. So yeah, getting up into that space where you're just secure and the feeling that you're going to have a starter, like week 1, like you can put that guy into your week 1 lineup and go to sleep easy at night. Like I have no problem with that at all.
Look, I looked at it like I was sending the 2 of the 3 combination of Will Levis, Zay Flowers, Dalton Kincaid, two of those 3 guys for Jahmyr Gibbs. Give me that every single time. Easy decision for me.
I was thinking more of like a Jalen Hyatt Roshan type of.
You are insane with that Jalen Hyatt. You need to stop mentioning him in the first round. No, you are way too high. You need to be trading.
It was a 2.5 and a 2. Oh, I'm sorry. It was 1.9, 1.10. Yeah, never mind. My bad. I was thinking the 2.5, 2.9. My bad.
You went a rookie draft last week. I think it was one quarterback, but you still took him. It's very, very early. Jalen Hyatt.
It's one QB. Go get your guys.
I like it. I respect it.
Go get your guys.
Okay. Well, that you've been reading the show sheet, because that leads in perfectly into my next strategy is throw ADP out the window. I don't think there's anything that puts less experienced fantasy players at a bigger disadvantage than the preloaded ADP on Sleeper and MFL for these drafts. Obviously these lists provide some insight, but they often aren't up to date and shouldn't be really followed. They should, like you were saying it earlier, they shouldn't be followed really, because these preloaded ADPs, it varies a lot depending on the website, and especially right if you do it right after the NFL draft, a lot of it's pre-draft analysis that's factoring into that. So fantasy managers always, like you were saying earlier, should create their own rankings or have one handy from a trusted website or analysts like SGPN or us, for example. Veteran drafters use that. I feel like I use these preloaded ADPs as a big advantage of work when I play to get an edge up on everybody, because like I said, I haven't done a dynasty rookie draft or a dynasty startup draft actually in a year and a half, because a real one, because I've did way too many COVID leagues. But if you get in on there, and I'll use the rookie draft for an example, because I'm super plugged in with those right now. Roshan Johnson on Sleeper, I think he's like the 20th, 22nd ranked player. He's my 16th ranked player, because of that landing spot. Nathaniel Tank Dell, he's floating around. I don't know if that's late, and he got 3rd round NFL draft capital already. CJ Stroud's talking about now. He's a long shot, of course, but he is nowhere near like where he's in like the 40s. So there's some values to be had. If you're looking down the draft board, you want to get ahead of it. So take him early. You don't want to wait till their ADP comes up. But every single pick, there's somebody. Usually when you're this far out from the season, there's always a pick. Every single one, you're like, oh man, I can't believe that guy's still there. Oh,
mouse in the house. That guy's
still there. So, like you were saying, so do you use that strategy? A lot.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about Jalen Hyatt. I pulled him up over the board, and I see him as a climber right now as we're getting farther away from the NFL draft. You're going to constantly see market shifts. He's a name that I've seen climb. What I like to really do is I like to go into the draft room. Like, if you're doing a mock, mock drafting should definitely be on the list here. Get my tongue tied as well here. Contagious from Emerson. I go into the draft, I go into each position, and I scroll down and I see what are my, position end stops, like my tier breaks essentially. Like if I want to leave this draft with 2, let's say it's a rookie draft and I want to leave with 3 receivers, right? I go to the lowest receiver that I would find acceptable to take, and I stop right there. I am watching this break line in ADP at that position, and I don't want to cross that without X amount of receivers. And hopefully I get my guys, right? Like if I'm needy at the position, I may have to take some swings with guys I may not have liked as much, but may have, some good narratives. But at the end of the day, I want to go after my guys, hopefully at ADP or later if I can. Again, you want to play the board with some parity. You don't want to just completely pull someone from the 5th round to the 1st round in a rookie draft. That's not necessary, especially if you have other picks. That 20-team league I was telling you about, I took Roshan at pick 11 because I only had 1 pick out of 40. He was the guy I wanted to leave with, and I needed a running back. I didn't want to break into another position just because I thought, maybe someone had a little bit of a better outlook, right? I just wanted to leave with my guy, someone that I wanted to target who I believe has a very safe career floor. So create that type of tier break and then don't pass it. Just follow your own rules, right? Just, create your own parameters to, not pass a certain value threshold.
That's good advice. And, I'm the same, and another great example, I think, transferring it to underdog is, Deontay Johnson, still sitting way down there.
Oh God, it's criminal.
Wide receiver like 38. I think once people start doing analysis on the season, they realize, oh man, Deontay Johnson was 6th in targets last year and had 0 touchdowns. How's that going to happen again?
I don't know. I don't know how Anthony Richardson and Deshaun Watson are ahead of Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, and Kirk Cousins. I don't know.
Anthony Richardson's intriguing because
he's QB10.
I know it's so high. It's so high, but I don't think that'll be the case in standard leagues. I think you have a lot of savvy, like a lot of fantasy analysts who think, who are outsmarting. Maybe it'll end up they're outsmarting.
That's why I bring it up though. It's just another one of these things you're just like, what the heck? And then you just got to tell yourself it's May 15th.
Anthony Richardson is so intriguing because, if he just floats out there, you could see him be extremely productive. Just if he's out on that field, you know what I mean? He could
just get him after ADP. That's all I can say. Just after pick 84 on Underdog. That's all I can say.
If you draft Michael Pittman, take your shot on Anthony Richardson. That's what you should be doing in Underdog drafts.
I still recommend waiting till ADP or later, even if you draft Pitt.
This is another one where I'll kick it off to you first. So, how do you feel about trading future draft picks in dynasty football leagues?
Like in the draft?
We can, we'll get into that, but in general, but yeah, you can talk about how you would approach it in a startup draft too.
Yeah, I mean, in a startup draft, no. I like to hold my picks. It's a draft, right? Like it's a startup draft. You should be able to find opportunities of value without giving up your position. And maybe it's also just like my experience, but in a lot of leagues that I'm in, dude, like I cannot stand the amount of crazy like swaps in a startup draft. Like, guys, have you never drafted before? Like it's a draft. Like it's like we didn't just start playing Monopoly with like hundreds and thousands of dollars here. Like they want to like take the game and just like elevate it so quickly. And I'm all for it because while the winds are blowing, my tower of picks is standing straight still up and down. You know what I mean? You know how you see like all the names swapping around the board on Sleeper? Then you just see Bruni's team and it's just this tower of straight picks going up and down. I trust myself just too much to think that I have to like give up, like a 4th and a 5th to get an extra 2nd round pick. Like I just don't need to do that. And that's just my experience. Now I will say, like you had said, like you thought this was a dead draft, right? Like you were like we both said, it's 6 and done. You're not pleased with the amount of talent that you're getting or the deeper value. So you're selling picks, right? I would wait to do that until the draft because people are just going to be hungry for more picks. They're just going to be so desperate, right? So that's my kind of take on that is if you're going to sell, your picks, wait as close to the draft or get into the draft as possible and just drive up that hunger cost for everybody else around you.
Yeah, I agree. I have mixed feelings about it as well. It can be people always want to win right away. There's a lot of people that want to win right away. I guess that's not always the case in dynasty leagues. You have always those guys who want to accumulate rookie picks who put themselves out 1 or 2 years from competing as well. But what I'm always nervous about with trading away your future picks is a couple of injuries and a few players not meeting expectations can have a championship contender finish at the bottom of the rankings all of a sudden. I can think of one roster I had last year with Swift and Javonte Williams and Breece Hall and Deebo Samuel and Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford at quarterback that turned out into a disaster. I thought that team, I had traded the two, I had Garrett Wilson, a wide receiver, that was obviously a great pick, but, and I had traded out like 2 years worth of draft picks to get that team together. And it was terrible. So,
damn.
Somebody is enjoying my early draft pick this year. So, I don't, and if you are going to do it, don't ever sell your future draft picks, assuming it's going to be late. You should always get at least mid first round value for it, assuming that, don't ever let another fantasy manager tell you that, your pick's going to be late. I'm going to give you this, you know what I mean? So if that's going to be the case, wait for better value. So I always tell people that, if you're going to sell your first, you can sell your first, but make sure you're getting that good value for it. And, consider, look at the draft class, and, think if I have the 6th pick in a super flex draft next year, what value do I want for that? That could be a very good running back. So don't set yourself too far behind with that. And, this kind of I was going to ask you what kind of your next feelings on this one too. You kind of touched on it a little bit. So moving up and down in a startup draft, you are set. You do not trade in a startup draft. There's very few exceptions. I'm guessing.
Like I have before. I just don't like to, because again, like when everybody is moving and shifting around, typically happens, and again, this is my personal experience, when we get to the double-digit rounds, everyone is coming to me for picks. Everyone is hungry to make up for the value that they lost. And again, more than likely, unless you're giving up also future picks from another draft, you're probably either leaving with less players and you're going to rely on picking up waiver wire players, or you're just thinking that like, oh, I've got an extra second and third round pick. Your team is going to be so front loaded. You're going to be, coming to me again, probably in midseason to find backup for your bench or for an injured player. So I just don't get too caught up into overly chasing upside in like those first extra rounds. And that's really the only time I would do it, is if I could get exposure to like, a player that I would take in the top 3 rounds, whether it be like an extra quarterback or an extra receiver, whatever. It would be of high value. It would not be like, take my 11th and 12th for an extra 10th. Like, that makes no sense to me. And again, I'm more experienced. I've been playing the game a long time. I trust myself more. Like, if you feel like you don't know how to draft 6th and 7th round players, then maybe trade those picks for another 4th rounder. I don't know. But that's typically what you're doing, right? Like, you're swapping the value. And if you're not getting an exact swap, like that type of 2-for-1, or, I take your 2nd and 4th and you take my 2nd and 3rd, like that's still, a pretty even swap, right? So unless you're getting ahead of that, you'd have to give up more, like another future pick, or you wouldn't have a player yet, but maybe a rookie draft position or something like that, whatever else, you have available to you in a startup. So I just don't like to overcommit right out of the gate. I just like to trust my process, go through it as the winds are blowing, keep the tower steady.
And I think, it always changes a bit, right, every year. And I need to get into a Dynasty Superflex draft to see where it starts. But usually that 8th, 9th, 10th round range, a lot of the time, you're right. Those people are hungry for picks. They traded up in the draft. They're missing starters. They didn't have a ton of picks early. And hey, they are giving away their future draft capital at a huge discount. You can give away, like, I saw somebody talk about a trade, an analyst talk about a trade on a network I work for. They gave away their 2024 first round pick for Roshan Johnson and John Mechie. So that's
startup.
I don't think it was this was in a rookie draft, I imagine. But,
well,
you can imagine it. You can imagine it. Well, yeah. Yeah. It must have been the rookie pick, and then they got John Mechie in the rookie. I imagine.
But still, that's bad.
I know, but you can imagine it in the startup, somebody getting the 11th and 13th, trading their 2024 first for an 11th and 13th round pick. That's kind of the same thing that just happened.
No, that's nuts, man.
Yeah, that is
nuts. Don't do that.
But people, that's what I mean. Like, you can be actually a competing roster and still acquiring first round picks when people do stuff like that. Like when Isaiah Pacheco or or somebody like that breaks out, just somebody random this season, and somebody wants to send their first round pick for him. Yes, go ahead and do that. You know what I mean? So there's always players like that. Low draft capital players that I'd love to cash out on. So you can always get future draft picks. There's always a point where I love acquiring future draft picks too.
And I also want to say this too, because I'm sure that there are plenty of content people out there that can give you like the best recipe for one of those trades. The best way to gain value by moving up. I'm sure that there is somebody out there that can lay out a blueprint where you can gain more value to that. But I compare it to, opening up a chess game with more aggression than you should, right? Like, you're trying to beat somebody in 3 moves, when just play the long game, go to the end game, take it down to a couple of pieces and just, beat the board. You don't have to just win the draft or win your league within the first 3 to 4 picks. And I think that a lot of people just get overwhelmed with like kind of just draft hype, excitement. Obviously, it's a lot of fun. Key tip that I would add in is just take notes throughout your entire draft, right? Just like take notes on other owners, be attentive. Obviously it's fun to kick back, smoke a stogie, and, pop open a couple of beers and, dive into the draft. But I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy the fruits of your labor a lot more, if you're paying attention, taking notes, looking where you can steal and add value.
And one thing it's important, I thought you touched on, was, having, you talked about your experience, be able to make that pick at every single pick. This ties in a few things we were talking about. There's going to be a value at that pick. So, if you're trading away or trading up, like, to a pick, you'd be shocked, if you're moving up 10 spots from the 2-5 to the 2-5 to the 1-7, let's say, or something like that, from the mid-second to the mid-first or something along those range. Especially maybe a little bit deeper in draft, you'd be shocked at who falls to you. You know what I mean? You'll be like, oh my God, that guy was there. That guy was there. And I gave up that pick and then all that extra stuff. And that guy was there. Oh, why did I do that? That happens a lot in drafts. So, you always be mindful of that. The only time I really like to move up is if there's just a guy, I can't believe he's there. And I'm just like, I have to have him. You know what I mean? Or if I see like the quarterbacks drying up and Dak Prescott's there in the third round of a startup draft. And I'm like, oh man, I need another great quarterback. Let me see if I can grab Dak Prescott there. But moving down is actually something I always really like to do. Because yes, what we talked about, you always get value later on and more than you're expecting. So, I loved, trading away my first round pick and getting a third and a fifth round pick and maybe like a seven. I had some absurd trade, especially a few years ago. I'd trade away my first round pick and get a third, a fifth, and a seventh round startup pick. You're just like, take that to the bank. I have 10 starters. Value. I have 10 starters by the seventh round. That's a strategy that you were able to employ a couple years ago. That's what every manager wants to do now, though, especially if you're just hopping on a random sleeper draft board. Most people are that's what everyone's, when you get into a dynasty startup draft, they're like, I want to move down. That's just kind of what happens now. You know what I mean? So everyone's kind of privy to that. But if you can move, especially if the quarterbacks are drying up and you're, in a super flex draft and you're kind of in that late first round range and not an elite quarterbacks available, move down, trade down, see if somebody wants to take those running backs and wide receivers that have a little bit more fluctuating value. Those are some of my favorite startup strategies, at least. Justin, did we leave out something? What are anything else that you want to touch on?
No, I kind of wrapped it there with the pay attention to the draft.
Yeah,
the draft, feel the draft.
And I like I said, I am just steadfast in what I'm going to do. I'm going to be taking the best player on my board that's available. Treat your dynasty team like a stock. That is what, or like many stock, each player like a stock, I should say. And you're trying to accumulate as much assets and capital as you possibly can. You can always make a trade later. That is what I always tell people. Justin, anything exciting going on this week with SGPN?
Hopefully Underdog lets me back on the platform and I have something to talk about. Otherwise, I'm just a puppet up here.
I mean, my goodness, I can't Underdog let a content creator back onto the platform? My goodness, like I said,
they just need to get back to an email at this point.
If you're going to be doing that many drafts, my goodness, you need to start doing some puppies, my friend. The $5 puppies, they're so like ballers. I could do 3
puppies right now, but I'm holding that $15 for my next Best Ball Mania draft. So I could do 3 puppies, but I don't want to.
The puppy's about 80% people. Ballers on a budget like myself, get in there, okay? $5 a draft, and plug promo code SGPN in there and give us some credit too.
Well, they'll have another one after it, so there's
always
be a puppy.
There's always another draft on Underdog. I compare it to the like Matthew McConaughey, being like, you never let them take their money. You know what I mean? Because that would make the money real. You know what I mean? Like that's exactly what Underdog is. When they win, you give them another draft, another way to reinvest their money.
What's that from?
Wolf on Wall Street.
Okay,
it's the exact same thing. The Underdog guy. I mean, that's Matthew McConaughey in that movie. They're like, you never let them take their money with them. That would make the money real.
I was thinking for some reason. No, that's absolutely from the movie. I know exactly where you're referring to it, but in my head, I was thinking that you were referring to his gambling movie 2 for the Money, and I couldn't think of it. That was the first thing that came to my mind was 2 for the Money with him and wasn't Al Pacino, was it?
I don't know if I've seen that one. I guess I know what I'm watching tonight.
Yeah, go check that out. 2 for the Money, really good stuff. But no, that is a great scene, absolutely, and I 100% agree.
So Underdog, there is always another draft on Underdog. So up until the season and during the season and the playoffs and all year round. So thank you for Underdog. And you can find my stuff. We'll be doing a weekly podcast at SGPN. We'll be back next week, Sunday. I'll be dropping an Orphan Guide this week, a little bit later on with SGPN. TWSN, Player Profiler as well, and the Face Off Sports Network. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.